Someone who's been into politics heavily since the 80s and watching the re-emerging takeover of the American government by mostly unknown but super wealthy oligarchs, it's amazing yet depressing to see people on various media formats expressing their belief that Donald Trump caused all of America's problems. It hasn't taken long for me to realize many of the average citizens involved in the political discussion today have been otherwise asleep before Trump was elected in 2016. Full disclosure, you will more than likely notice, at least in my opinion, a higher expectation for the Democratic Party to represent at least some level of political decency. That is, at least in comparison to the Republican Party. This is because as a political entity, I feel there is no hope for the Republicans as a political organization. They have allowed themselves to be completely overrun with extreme racist, anti-common class ideology. Also, in my lifetime, I've never known the Republican Party to even pretend to represent average people or disown the racist foundation of their party. I love it when Democratic Party loyalists make memes pointing out the horrible things Republicans have done, then sarcastically ask, "Tell me again how both parties are the same?" I always think to myself, well, obviously they aren't the exact same. One is a normal center-right conservative party, which would be the Democratic Party. The other is a straight-up magnet for hate groups and an open threat to humanity. Why even ask if they're the same? Is your bar really that low? When people say they're the same, it's just convenient to assume they mean in every way. They more than likely mean in the ways that really count. You know, like voting for perpetual wars, funding violent military coups, and constantly voting for tax cuts for the rich. I've never donated to the RNC, and unlike the Democratic Party, they've never asked me for a donation. They don't fill my inbox with emails begging for cash or for me to volunteer like Democrats do. Even after I've unsubscribed from numerous DNC email lists, those emails somehow just keep on coming. It is my belief that the modern-day Republican Party is an open threat to the world, and if they won't even pretend to be otherwise, why should I pretend to see them as anything different? But at the same time, I will give no quarter to the Democratic Party in their open adoption of neoliberal ideology. The only thing I'll give the Democratic Party is they at least seem to realize it is in their best interest to pretend to be a more political entity. There is at least that.
By electing John and the Reverend, you can make an immediate difference in your own lives, the lives of the people all across this country, because their election will put an end to the block in Washington on that $2,000 stimulus check, that money that will go out the door immediately.
But the Democratic Party of the day is more like the Republican Party of the 80s, even according to the head of the party, Barack Obama.
The truth of the matter is that my policies are so mainstream that, you know, if I had said the same policies that I had back in the 1980s, I'd be considered a moderate Republican.
You may have noticed my reference to a re-emerging takeover by the super wealthy oligarchs in the United States in a previous statement. That will be an important point going forward because in the dark corners of American politics, there has always been a fight between the wealthy and the common class in the United States, with the rich always claiming that everything they do is out of love of freedom and country. Very bipartisan way, the elites are very protective of empire. Proof of this was many of their reactions to Donald Trump's victory in 2016. However, in hindsight, the reaction was predictable considering how many elites laughed at the very idea that Trump could ever win in the first place.
All I want to say is that anybody, from the Democratic side of the fence who thinks that, who's terrified of the possibility of President Trump, better vote, better get active, better get involved, because This man has got some momentum, and we better be ready for the fact that he might be leading the Republican ticket.
Next, I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on.
Sorry to laugh.
Next
Hey,
week,
you know, George, we had Jesse Ventura in Minnesota win the governorship. Nobody thought he was going to win. I'm telling you, stranger things have happened.
Well, and also, George,
Truth be told, aside from not being an insider, Trump had all of the stereotypical characteristics of a Republican. He was obviously racist, xenophobic, and extremely corrupt. Though his victory was totally unexpected, looking from the outside, you would think his only enemies would have been progressives and actual leftists, because other than being too ignorant to hide it, he was everything Republicans have always been.
I think foreign observers are troubled by some of the rhetoric that's been taking place in these Republican primaries and Republican debates. I don't think it's restricted, by the way, to Mr. Trump. I mean, I find it interesting that everybody's focused on Trump primarily just because he says in more interesting ways what the other candidates are saying as well. And so he may up the ante in anti-Muslim sentiment, but if you look at what the other Republican candidates have said, that's pretty troubling too. He may express strong anti-immigration sentiment, but you've heard that from the other candidates as well. You've got a candidate who sponsored a bill that I supported to finally solve the immigration problem, and he's running away from it as fast as he can. They're all denying climate change. I think that's troubling to the international community, since the science is unequivocal.
After Trump won the election in 2016, one common assertion was that poor, struggling whites voted for him out of desperation because they loved his populist rhetoric. Aside from the fact that he didn't mean any of it, he dared speak of things even Democrat elites dare not, such as protecting Social Security and putting an end to America's War Forever program. This scared the hell out of some very powerful people. The unknown obviously petrified them. As a result, a great number of right-wing, anti-Trump establishment elitists simply couldn't contain their hatred when it came to expressing their disdain for these so-called poor whites, and began to make all sorts of generalizations and stereotypes about the same people they normally pandered to. So if you're an average white person, the lesson here is, like the English crown oligarchs who first helped establish America, these people only love you when it's convenient. But in the right circumstances, they'll make all sorts of generalizations and stereotypes about you. Simply put, they'll treat you like you're black. But you just keep fighting for your imaginary white privilege. Far be it from me to tell you what to do. Well, we're going to go ahead and end part 1 of how political bias and the two-party system is destroying America right here. Part 2 will be coming up very soon, though I don't have an exact date right now. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, stay safe.